Assalamu alaikum. So could we get settled down, please? Those brothers who have younger kids with them, we have a special room for you reserved over there. Do I see any sisters over there? If there are any sisters over there, I'll request the sisters to take the elevator and go upstairs. And for sisters with any kids, inshallah, they can go in that room as well, so we could have a little bit of a quieter playground here. So does anybody know our personality today? Okay. He was born in 1877, and he is a descendant of a Kashmiri Brahmin family that embraced Islam in the 17th century. He was born in Sialkot. Iqbal, yes, Jazakallah khair. Does anybody else know what else is made in Sialkot? Yes. Sports good and surgical equipment. This FIFA World Cup, Pakistan, the city of Sialkot, produced 300,000 soccer balls. Every single ball that you saw, it was actually made in this city, the city of Iqbal. So, Iqbal, who's also called Allama Iqbal, a term of respect, but his name is Mohammad Iqbal. He is actually one of the most influential people in the history of Islam, although he's been very recent, but his impact is still being felt and will continue to be felt for a long time. The reason why he was able to basically tap into this type of influence over the Ummah was because he tapped into the pain of the Ummah. He tapped into the pain of the Ummah. So, who was Iqbal? Of course, he is known as the poet of the East, right? However, if you think of him as a poet like you think of any other poet, you would misunderstand Iqbal. Some of the scholars have said that if you read the poetry of Iqbal, if you pay close attention, you would realize that you're actually reading the tafsir of the Quran. So he was using poetry as a linguistic tool to express his thoughts, which were based on the teachings of Islam. And in fact, so Iqbal grows up. He's born in 1877. He's born in Sialkot. And the first thing that he gets is a traditional education. And he learns Arabic, Persian, Urdu. And of course, Hindi is very close to Urdu. So he's basically fluent in these languages. Afterwards, he was exposed to a liberal education that defined the contours of his thought. Basically, he studied the standard traditional sciences that Muslims used to study at the time, but then he got a chance to study from a Western perspective as well. So some of his schools are called Scottish Mission School. He did MA in philosophy, and he joined Trinity College. He became a lawyer, bar at law. And he went to Germany and he got his PhD on the development of metaphysics in Persia. Okay? Now, what made Iqbal different is that his education was that of a traditional Maulvi in Pakistan, in India, right? Basically the Maulana, the religious class. But as we all know that the religious class of late has not been very effective in these countries, in our countries, right? Because while they learn traditional Islamic sciences, a lot of times people say that they are not able to bridge the gap between the reality of today and the traditional sciences, right? Meaning, how can you bring those and apply them to today's situation? So when people go out of the box and they study and they experiences which are completely different, then of course their thoughts are completely different. And of course, as a result of this, as you can imagine, that some of the religious class did not like Iqbal, and they gave fatwa against him of kufr, which is very much expected, because basically, if somebody is just sitting in his masjid and he doesn't like somebody, usually the only tool he has is say, okay, this guy, he has nothing to do with Islam. So until today, whenever a revolutionary type of thinker comes, some of the greatest scholars that you can think of in the past, other people in their time basically pass fatwa against them, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives success, and He's the one who gives izzah to whomever He wishes. So he furthered his education. As we said, he went to Germany, and he lived in Europe for some time. Now, what happened was that before he went to Europe, okay, we have too much noise coming from all directions. So while this room and that room is for kids, it is not to be running around and playing around. It is for you to sit down, and if they make a little bit of noise, that's okay. I see a kid standing on top of a chair or on a table, and that is definitely not okay. All right. So he becomes a lawyer, and as we said that he went and he spent some time in Europe. Now, when he went to Europe, he had a experience that many of us, alhamdulillah, we feel it a lot less, but if you go in Europe, you would feel it a lot more. And that is that no matter how educated you are, no matter how influential you are back home, in some of these countries, in the minds of some of these people, you are still just equal to their servants, because their servants look the same as you, okay? So you are treated as a second-class citizen. And when he went there, he realized and he felt the humiliation of being treated as a second-class citizen. And this impacted him, and he started to think even broader as to the state of the Ummah. Right now, what is the state of the Ummah in this time? This is a time when India is colonized by the British, okay? And not just India, but almost every corner, every edge of the Muslim world has been divided up like pieces of cake between European colonial powers, okay? Some countries, there is France, some country, most of them England and France, right? But some countries were taken by Belgium, by Spain, by Portugal, all sorts of, basically they just got together and they said, okay, you know what do you want? He says, I want this. What do you want? I want this. And they basically divided up as they wished, right? And when they divided up these countries, when they made these nation states, they did not take into account the people that are living there, right? So for example, in Pakistan and Afghanistan, the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, the area of what in Pakistan is called KPK, right? The people are exactly the same as the people of Afghanistan, right? They are really families living on both sides. However, somebody just sat down and said, okay, let's draw a line over here, and they drew a line and they divided into two different countries, right? And this happened all across the Muslim world. So for example, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, right? These are very similar people, similar ethnic backgrounds, but somebody said, okay, let's divide them up into three. If you remember, when the Iraq war was going on and America was having a hard time tackling Iraq, a certain senator from Delaware came up with the idea that let's break up Iraq into three countries: a Sunni Iraq, a Shia Iraq, and a Kurdish Iraq. Do you know what the name of that senator was? Joe Biden. He's the president now. So, basically, they say, okay, man, we got a problem on our hands. How can we solve this, right? So they basically did this. I was reading something about the man who drew up the border between India and Pakistan, because when they divided up, they said, okay, so they called a lawyer from England who had no idea about the history of the region, about the people that lived there, ethnicities, families, tribes, all that type of stuff. He basically sat down with a map, and he looked at geographical things, what looked like to him dividers, like a mountain range or a river or a little creek or something. He says, okay, let's draw the border over here, and just divided up the two countries. So Iqbal was feeling this pain, and he was feeling this humiliation. Now, on top of this, if you know about his own experience, which is in India, as you know that first the British India Company came to India, and they started to basically gobble up, start to take over. Eventually, there was a rebellion, and instead of the British backing up, they said, okay, you know what, we're not going to pretend like you are free and we are a different people. We're not going to pretend anymore. Now they implemented what's called the British Raj. They said, okay, now we're going to directly control you. Before we were doing it through the company, now we're going to control you. At that time, one of the things the British did is that they established factories, and they specifically targeted children to be hired as employees. Okay, because, of course, children are easy to control. They don't talk back. They don't talk about, they cannot talk back to a white man giving them orders. And then on top of that, they want to subjugate this population. So if you can control the children from being educated, they're going to be very easy to control because they will be completely dependent on what you give them. So some of the scholars, they picked up on this and they started to offer money to parents. They said, we will give you money if you send your child to study instead of going to send them to work. Okay? Don't send them to work because you're destroying. And until today, any country, any nation, any people, in order for them to be uplifted out of the darkness or the oppression that they're in, one of the key things that they need to have is education. So Iqbal was feeling all of this pain, and he worked in different capacities after he basically became a lawyer. He worked in different capacities at different points of time. He taught philosophy, practiced law, got involved in politics, and also attended the second Roundtable Conference. So the Roundtable Conferences, there were 3 of them, when the people of India started to say to England that, look, we don't accept your authority. You're not supposed to be here. You need to get out of here. So usually what they do is that, when they're feeling some weakness, what does the slave master do? He says, okay, let's sit and talk on a table. Okay, let's bring some tea, let's bring some biscuits, British biscuits, right? And let's talk about it. So they did these 3 roundtable conferences where they invited all the political leaders of Hindus and Muslims in India, and they brought them over to England, and they had these conferences with them. Or they may have had them. Where were the roundtable conferences? In India or in England? I think they were in England, right? Anyways, so he attends the second roundtable conference as well. So at this time, the movement for the independence of India is starting to look real. It's starting to look like it's happening. Now, up until this time, the Muslims and Hindus were united that, we need to just get rid of the British. But something occurred to Iqbal that not many people at the time saw the reality of it, but actually what he saw at that time is becoming a reality now. Iqbal said that if we only get one country, if we only get one state, the state of India, what's going to happen is that the Hindus are way more than the Muslims. Okay, Muslims are a very small minority. What's going to happen over time is that the Muslims will be crowded out in influence and power by the Hindus. I mean, if you're having like a democratic election, right? And these are not people, he was perhaps reading these people, that these are not people who are going to be equal to everybody that's living under them. So he said, you know what? Before British leaves, he said, no, we don't need one state. We need 2 states. So he came up with the idea of Pakistan. He said that there needs to be a country which is specifically for Muslims, because he was worried that Hindus will basically, take the rights of the Muslims. And subhanAllah, it didn't happen at that time. There were clashes, up and down all throughout the time. But now, as you know, that in India, there is a very, very strong, brutal movement going on to basically make India a Hindu nation, which means that you will be a first-class citizen if you're a Hindu, and Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and any other religions, they're having a really, really hard time in India right now. There are mobs that are basically state-funded and state-sponsored who are going around and terrorizing and killing people. There's mob lynchings happening all across India. Unfortunately, there's so many of this stuff is on YouTube. that it is really getting really difficult. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for the innocent people anywhere in the world. Now, before Iqbal went to Europe, he was what we call an Indian nationalist, okay? Indian nationalist. Now, what does the word nationalist mean to you? What do you think? Anything your state does is right, okay? Anybody else? What does the word nationalist mean to you? Assalamu alaikum. Hello? Okay, all right. So, anybody? Yes. Ethnic bond, okay? So you look towards a nation and you say that we are all united in one bond and we are different from everyone else. So that's along, both of you are correct. By the way, Abdullah, can you please come downstairs? So secularism is usually one of the key, it's usually when you're a nationalist, religion is not your driving force, it's your identity, whether it's national identity. Sometimes you have a certain tribe and you are saying that, okay, this is the people that I belong to, this is our identity, and this is the first thing that comes up. Now, sometimes it can be good, right? So if you are speaking on behalf of oppressed people, that's good. That's, you're trying to protect their rights. If you happen to be, 20 Chinese people living in America, and these 20 people are being oppressed, so you say, hey, we need to protect the rights of the Chinese people, right? But if you are in a majority, and now you're saying that, hey, this country belongs to us, and these other guys are aliens, these are the other, these are the people that are taking our jobs, and they're taking our resources, and we need to deal with them, and this type of rhetoric, then of course that's exactly what Hitler did in Germany, where they were German nationalists, right? And they said that the German identity is what we all belong to, and anybody, basically Jews are not German. So these are people taking our jobs, they're taking our businesses, and we need to deal with these people in the right way, and you know how that went down. So before he went to Europe, he basically stood up for the Indian national identity, because again, he's fighting against the British right now, right? But then when he went to Europe, he saw that nationalism actually does not result in a good outcome, right? Because he felt that, okay, these are nations that have a national identity, but they are not necessarily doing very well. From an Islamic perspective, we always look at, family values, we look at moral values, and he saw a decline of that. He saw a decline of that, alcohol and, sleeping around and, single mothers, all these type of things. These are some things that Islam, we see as very important in Islam. But he says, you know what? This is not a good idea. National identity, it should be secondary. The first identity should be the religious identity. So he came back and he came up with the idea that, hey, you know what? If we all mix together, we are going to be crowded out, and our culture, our values are going to be affected, which we don't want to give up. So we need to have a two-state solution. We need to have a two-state solution. And by the way, while he was in his travels in Europe, he visited Masjid al-Qurtuba, okay, in Spain. And there's a famous poem that he wrote. Now, Masjid al-Qurtuba, as you know, is, right now, it has been turned into a museum, and you're not allowed to pray there. Okay, it used to be the most magnificent mosque in the whole world at one point. Now you can go there, you can visit it as a museum, but you're not allowed to pray there. So he somehow did get a chance to pray there. There's actually a picture of him praying there. And he wrote a poem where he's eulogizing the state of the Ummah while keeping Masjid Qurtuba as the example. Like, how sad it is that we can't even come and pray in this magnificent place which used to be a masjid. So he's feeling that pain. So So at that point, he comes back and he's then called basically the spiritual father of Pakistan, right? Mufakkir-e-Pakistan. That he's the one who came up with the idea that we need in a Muslim state because otherwise it will not be good for Muslims in India. Interesting, weird case, by the way, is that in 1920, he was knighted. He was made a knight by King George V. Okay? Now, can you think about why would King George want to make a guy like this a knight? It's like an award, a medal of honor type of thing. So why would King George want to give Iqbal a medal of honor? What is that? Stop him. So that's what I think as well. So now when he got this, the other Muslim leaders, they actually said to Iqbal that, why are you accepting this? You should spit in their face. Like, we are trying to fight against them. We're trying to kick them out, just like in America, right? You're trying to get rid of the English crown. Why are you accepting this? So he said that, look, he gave it to me for my literary works, not my political works. Okay, and he basically never really turned around and even looked at it again that, okay, so that's why, I particularly don't like when people refer to people as sir, right? Because, British government, they have done some good things. They've also done a lot of bad things as well, right? So when particularly a regime that is oppressive, colonial, is giving titles to people, you know that they're not giving titles to people who are speaking the truth to power. Either they're trying to dissuade them and bribe them into saying, hey, take it easy on us, or these are somehow undercover agents working for them, trying to create, whatever type of stuff. So, when Muslims use the title sir, I'm like, you don't know the history of what the British government has done. You need to think about that. So then, let's move on. So Iqbal's poetry, like we said, that he used poetry as a tool to get the message of Islam across. And poetry at that time was very common. You would basically, like the way these days you would like make a TikTok or you would make a Instagram reel. In those days, you would basically put out a poem. And the people would read it in the newspapers. They would invite you to the radio to read it. And people say, wow, 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 what an amazing poem, right? This was kind of like the influencing method of the time. And Iqbal was very, very good at it. So when he noticed the Muslim Ummah in this limp body, so he wrote a poem, one of the most famous poems that he has is called Shikwa, right? Any non-Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshis ever heard this poem called Shikwa? Okay, what does Shikwa mean in Arabic? Complaint, right? So he wrote a complaint to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's amazing, it's so sad, but it's also so amazing in the way that he wrote it, that he's talking to Allah and he's saying, Ya Allah, we are the ones who worship you, yet we are humiliated. Before us, the people were worshiping idols, and we are the ones who raised the flag of Tawheed. Yet, every time the lightning strikes, it seems to strike the Muslims, right? So he has this amazing poem that he wrote, and he read it, and the people were like just completely touched by it and amazed by it. So then, the next year, he wrote Jawab-e-Shikwa, the answer to the complaint. Okay, and that, of course, got him a lot of fatwas against him, because basically, in that poetic form, he pretended that Allah is giving us this response. Right now, again, he did not say that I am Allah and I'm giving you this response. He basically looked at the guidance of Quran and Sunnah as to what brings victory and what brings humiliation. And from that perspective, he answered this Muslim who was complaining. He said, that Allah says to this person who's complaining that yes, your forefathers are the ones who gave up their lives and who sacrificed for Islam, and I gave them victory. But what are you doing? You are not your forefathers. You have given up Islam. You have given up the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Does anybody know the last line of of Jawab Shikwa, by any chance? What is that? You read it in Arabic. And, so he did poetry in Arabic, in Persian, in Urdu, and in English. In English, he has some speeches and some literature that he did. And in Afghanistan and in Iran, he's known as Iqbal-e-Lahori, right? Iqbal-e-Lahori, and he's very much appreciated there too. So the last line of Jawab-e-Shikwa, which is the answer to this Muslim who's complaining about his situation, the last line, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ki Muhammad se wafa tune to hum tere hain. Ye jahan cheez hai kya, loh kalam tere hain. He said that if you become loyal to the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we are yours. This world is nothing. We will give you the command over the lawh and the qalam that you can write your own taqdeer. Okay? You become loyal to the Prophet ﷺ, the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, follow his way, and we will give you the victory. But until you do that, you're going to be in humiliation. Okay? And then, of course, initially people, they said, how can you give this response pretending to be Allah? But then when the message sank through that, he's not making anything up, he's just bringing everything back from what Allah has already said to us in the Quran and Sunnah. So then it was really, really appreciated, and it's one of the most famous works that he has. Now, another thing that Iqbal did was that he talked to the Muslim youth, and he gave them the example of a shaheen. What is a shaheen in English? What is that? It's a bird, right? So it's a falcon, right? So among his writings, you will see continuously the reference to the shaheen. And he's telling the Muslim youth that you need to be like a shaheen. You need to be like a falcon. So why the falcon? So among his other poetry, there are 5 characteristics that the falcon has that he wanted the Muslim youth to have to be able to stand up again. 5 characteristics. Number 1, what are the 5 characteristics? Let me ask you, what do you think? Why is he asking you to be like the shaheen, like the falcon? Okay, so one of them is that the eyesight of the falcon is one of the strongest and the best eyesight in the entire, all the different creations that we know. It can, while it's flying so high, it can see a small little mouse or rat basically walking in the farm, right? And that's why most of the times you would never see a snake out in the open. The snakes are always hidden under a branch, under a brick, because the falcons above them, they are on the prowl for snakes. If that snake comes out and sits outside, he's going to be gone in a second, right? So the only time they come out is when they get really cold and they need some sunlight to warm themselves up. But the falcon is there watching, and they can pick up. So number 1 is the sight. He says that the Muslim youth don't just look at today. You need to look far into the future. As to how you plan your life, what type of steps you're taking, look far into the future. What's number 2? Prowess? What do you say? Explain. The way it grabs. So I'll say in a different way. He said that the shaheen, the falcon, does not eat anything except what it catches itself. Okay? So basically, they say that Allah has made halal for the falcon to eat what it catches itself. If you take a bird and you kill it and you throw it in front of him, he's not going to eat it. He comes and he will come and catch it, right? And one of the famous lines from his poems is, Jhapatna, palatna, palatkar jhapatna, lahu garam rakhne ka hai ek tarika. So basically, when a falcon comes and hunts, right, it is so powerful, it is so fast, that it basically plays football with the bird in the air, right? Grabs him, lets him go. Then comes back around, grabs him again, lets him go. He says, this is just a way to keep my blood warm. He's not going to escape from me, right? He's not going to escape from me. I'm just having fun. So he says that this is the falcon. So that's number 2, that only eat what it hunts, meaning for a Muslim youth that you need to eat what is halal for you. Don't eat the haram. Don't eat that which is impure for you, okay? Number 3 is fights against the wind. Well, it flies very high, okay? It's one of the highest birds in terms of flight. There are hardly any birds that, I think that there are no other birds that fly higher than the falcon. So it flies very, very high. So it's telling, again, he's telling the Muslim youth that, hey, don't walk low, walk high, right? Take the high path. You can do better than what you're doing right now. Have high goals, fly high. That's number 3. Number 4 is that a falcon lives alone, right? You don't see them living as a family. Once they grow up enough to be able to fly out of the nest, so they basically go and they live on their own, they catch on their own. And Iqbal said that when you live alone, when you spend time in solitude, your creativity gets unlocked. Okay? If you always hanging out with people, that's not where you write, your best PhD thesis. You have to go into solitude. You have to really, your creativity gets unlocked when you are alone. So, and he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alone. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to spend time in the cave of Hira. And even at other times, like he's praying at night, he's alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says that that's another praiseworthy characteristic that Muslim youth need to, take on, which is you're always busy hanging out with people. Take some time to unlock your creativity and inspiration. And number 5 is that the falcon does not build a nest for itself. Does not build a nest. When it wants to lay eggs, because it's the most powerful bird, no other birds want to mess with him, he can go in any bird's nest and lay his eggs over there. So, but the point that Iqbal is making is that so many people, they are just so busy in building their house in this world, right? That their main concern is, man, how can I have a bigger house? How can I have a bigger house? And they are just lost in the pursuit of the resources that they need to build that house. But he says, be like a falcon. The falcon lives in the mountains. The falcon lives, in wild areas, flies high, hunts. When it needs to lay eggs, it just finds any suitable place and lays his eggs over there. But he's not busy building a house. If you are busy building a house in this world, you end up missing your house in the hereafter, right? And right now, with the state of the Ummah, you need people who are willing to live a simple life. They're not worried about living a luxurious life in this world while working for the goal that needs to be, which is to help the Ummah stand up again. So also very quickly, I'll just mention a few more points, is that he has a famous poem called Dil Soz Se Khali Hai, Nigah Pak Nahi Hai. It's his critique about the religious class, okay? His critique of the religious class, and of course, they were not very happy when he did that. But he basically said that you guys are imams, maulvis, shuyukh. You guys, your eyesight is not pure. It's on, there are many people who are basically there, religious clergy. There's so much corruption in the religious clergy in every religion. So he's saying to them that you guys, your eyes are on the pockets of people. So, dil soz se khali hai, and you have no sincerity in your heart. Nigah pak nahi hai, your eyesight is not pure. Then how can you be surprised that you're not getting the magical inspiration that is touching the people, right? You're not going to be able to make a change as long as you think like this. As long as, the Prophet ﷺ was asked by a companion, what can I do that Allah will love me and the people will love me? And the Prophet ﷺ said that have zuhd of this dunya, take the dunya out of your heart, take this world out of your heart, and God will love you. And take what is in the hands of people out of your heart, and the people will love you. When the people realize that this man is not after my money, he's not after my position, he's not after anything that I have, they start to become safe and secure with you, and they start to come close to you. But if they feel like this man is trying to get rich off of us, immediately the defenses go up and the people don't want to listen. So then he says, Musalman hai tawheed mein garam josh, magar dil abhi tak hai zunnar posh. He's saying that you're talking about all these, fancy magical words of tawheed, but the thing is, your heart is still full of idols. You're talking lip service to tawheed, that Allah is one and He's the only one that should be worshipped, but your heart still has so many other idols of temptation and power and influence and fame and all of these type of things. He says, Tamaddun tasawwuf shariat kalam bhutane ajam ke pujari tamam. That he's saying that you're talking about all these different fancy sciences, but these are not things that are bringing any benefit to the ummah. And he said, Hakikat kharafat mein kho gayi. The reality was lost in the formalities of the people, right? People are being so formal with each other that the truth that needs to be addressed, the elephant in the room, has been forgotten while we are just being so formal with each other, saying, how are you doing? I hope you had a good day. But what about this elephant in the room, right? And he says, Ye ummat riwayat mein kho gayi, that people became so absorbed in tradition that they forgot to adapt to the changing environment, right? So the old traditions, there are some religious class until today, they will say that, hey, if your head is not covered, your salah is not valid, right? And if your beard is not down to your chest, then you cannot be a good Muslim, right? And that's actually one of the critiques of Allama Iqbal by some narrow-minded people. He didn't have a beard, okay? So, we're not saying that discard all of those things. These are good, but the thing is that look at the bigger picture as well, okay? None of us are perfect. Every one of us has some imperfections, but if somebody has huge contribution to the ummah and they missed on one thing, you're going to throw away everything he did because of that one thing that he missed, right? And then he says, shikayat hai mujhe ya Rab khudawandane maktab se. Do you know what is maktab? Maktab is office. Maktab is also, in the Indian terminology, maktab is referred to the after-school Quran studying program. Okay? So you have maktab in your masjid, which means that you have an after-school Quran reading program for kids. So he said, Shikayat hai mujhe ya Rab khudawandane maktab se. Ya Allah, I have a complaint against the administrators of these maktabs. What is his complaint? He said, Sabak shahi bachon ko de rahe hain khakbazi ka. He said that these kids who are supposed to be shaheens, they are supposed to be flying, they're teaching them how to walk, right? Why would you teach a shaheen how to walk when he's meant to fly? So he says that these madaris, they have become so narrow-minded that they're not teaching these kids that, hey, you're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. They're teaching them you are slaves and you're going to remain slaves. Not in these exact terminology, but the way they're teaching them, the way they're talking to them, they're not raising leaders, they're raising slaves. So he said that I have a complaint against these people who are running these maktabs, that they're teaching these shaheen children, these children of falcons, they're teaching them how to walk on earth. So he has a number of famous works, which I'm going to skip. There's the famous leader of Pakistan. Who is the famous leader of Pakistan? Jinnah, right? Now, who is Jinnah? Jinnah grew up in England, right? He was basically what you call a white boy who happens to be Desi, right? If you listen to his speeches, his Urdu is really bad. He was the founder of Pakistan, but his Urdu was not so good. And up until a certain point, he wasn't even very religious. Okay, he wasn't even very religious. Even until the end, people until today, they doubt his true religiosity. However, he was a person who felt the pain of the people. And he was a very, very charismatic leader. Okay, he was so well dressed. He was so well spoken. his style would just knock your socks off, right? So Iqbal realized that this man is very useful for our movement, right? Now, there was a political party called the All India Muslim League, okay? And Iqbal was a much more influential leader in that than Jinnah was. Jinnah was like a kid in front of Iqbal. But Iqbal realized that the charisma of Jinnah can make us get our mission, okay? So what Iqbal did is that he started to prop up Jinnah. He started to prop up Jinnah, and he said that this is our leader. And he backed up himself, and he said, this is our leader. And, Dr. Isar Ahmed, he's a great scholar who passed away recently. He did a lot of work in the tafsir of the Quran. And he says that there was a certain meeting between Iqbal and Jinnah. And he said, in this meeting, Iqbal gave a shot of Islam to Jinnah, right? He gave him an injection. He says, unko Islam ka tika lagaya. He says that in this meeting, he told him that, hey, Islam is our identity. And from that point on, the words, the terminology, the concepts that Jinnah used, they changed as well. By the way, I know that a lot of Pakistanis, they always refer to him as Qaid-e-Azam, right? However, if you think about the meaning of Qaid-e-Azam, you would not want to say that, okay? Which means the greatest leader, okay? As a Muslim, our greatest leader is not Muhammad Ali Jinnah, right? It is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I don't mean any disrespect, but I just think that this title is a bit overblown in our case. So there's a famous story that one day Iqbal's son was very young. He was like 9 or 10 years old. And he said that I never got a chance to spend a lot of time with my father because he was always so busy, people were coming to meet him. But he said that I used to have a book in which I used to take autographs from famous leaders when they used to come meet my father. In our time, what an autograph is, does anybody know? What is an autograph in our time? Selfie, yes. You don't do autographs anymore. You do can I take a picture with you, right? As a proof that you met this person. Back in the days, they said, can you please sign this autograph? So Jawad Iqbal, the son of Iqbal, he had a book of autographs that he used to collect. So one day, Iqbal told him that, hey, today, at such and such time, make sure that you are here and bring that book of yours. So he said to him that, who is coming? And he said that the leader of the Muslims is coming. The leader, because of course in that area, he's referring to the movement there, that the leader of the Muslims in India is coming to our house. And in the evening when he came, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was sitting there, and he gave him his autograph. And of course, like we said that he was a very, very charismatic personality. Until today, you see him, he's a tall, slender man, very good looking, very nice hairstyle and all of that stuff. Basically, they say that there's actually some research that certain types of people with certain physique are meant to be leaders, okay? And certain other types of people with certain other physique, they're going to find it very difficult to get people to follow them. Because if they're short, if they look a certain way, people don't want to follow. But they see somebody like that, they automatically, intuitively, they start following them. So Jinnah was that personality. Now, Iqbal was a young man, pretty young. He was born in 1877, and he developed a number of health problems. It is said that he had a very severe case of asthma, and he had a number of other health issues like gout. That he, a lot of his pictures, you see him laying down on a bed, on a charpai. And they said that this was because of his gout, that he could not put his foot on the ground. He could not put his foot on the ground. It was very painful. And he passed away in 1938. So 77 to 38, how many years is that? 61, right? So 61 is, relatively young age. However, he made his contributions, and in 1938, on the 21st of April. He passed away. And he was actually buried. They were going to bury him somewhere else, but they had to actually get permission from the British governor, right? They had to get a permission from the British governor to be able to bury him in the place where he's buried, but the permission was granted, and he's obviously buried there today. Yes? 1938. So Iqbal actually was the one who came up with the idea of Pakistan, but he actually died 9 years before Pakistan came to fruition. So he never got to see his dream come true, but of course, one of the great things about good leaders is that for them, it's not about me. It's about the mission. So they pass on the mission to other people. They create other leaders. At that point, they don't care if they live or they die because the mission will continue. So he actually did not get to see Pakistan come to fruition. Musa alayhi salam, of course. Yes. We love who? Oh. Yes. So, he's mentioning an amazing point that, of course, if you look at some of his poems, there's a famous poem that, we talked about the last line. Then he made another poem which is called Loh Bitu Kalam Bitu. And it is a poem that he wrote in Farsi in praise of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and many, many others. One of his famous poems is, so he's very spiritual, and of course, he's a very, very deep thinker and a philosopher, they call him, but we don't say philosopher in the sense that secular, non-religious philosopher, but he's thinking about, okay, what the problem we have and what's the solution for it. So one of the amazing poems he wrote is, so his spiritual teacher, what I mean by that is that he read a lot of Rumi, okay? And he felt that Rumi was his guide in the sense that he was very, very inspired by Rumi. Now, between Iqbal and Rumi, how many years are there? Anybody knows? You know the famous Rumi poet, right? Between them, how many years? 600-700 years, right? 6-7 centuries between them. But he really was inspired by Rumi. But of course, I'm aware that there are some mystical ideas. But Iqbal was, he was very mainstream type of a person in those things. But he has a famous poem where he wakes up in a dream, and Rumi is there, and they go in the journey of heavens. And they meet different people, and they have different conversations with them. It's kind of like a, Isra wal Mi'raj inspired story, but it's a very interesting, a tale that he made in order to convey certain points. So that's all I have, by the way. If anybody has any questions or comments, any sisters want to share anything, I would say to everyone, whether you are from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or anywhere else, you can pick up some of the writings of Iqbal. The place where he lived in Germany, that house is still preserved. And there's a main street in the city that's named after him. And there's an entire research department in Germany dedicated to Iqbal studies. Okay? Germany recognized that this man was a genius way beyond his times. Unfortunately, sometimes the country that he came up with doesn't recognize that. Yes, brother. Alaikum salam. About the partition, yes. So these are debates that were actually taking place at that time. What is that? Okay, so the brother said that he has read some criticism about the idea of the two-state solution. That some of the people said, and among them was actually one of the great scholars, his name was Abul Kalam Azad. and he was a famous imam and scholar, and he basically, his speeches are still there. He said that, "Oh Muslims, where are you leaving these masajid to?" Right? All of this thing that we have here. But basically what the brother said is that the criticism of the partition that he has read is that had it remained one state, then the Muslims would have been a significant minority. But when they separated, what you left behind was now a very small minority that is bound to be crushed. Okay? So that is criticism. However, they felt that all Muslims should come into the Muslim country and they should leave because they saw basically, as they say, the tea leaves, they read the tea leaves, that it is not going to work out good for the Muslims over time. And now that is happening exactly as they had envisioned, which is that the few that are remaining there, which are not few, actually there are more Muslims in India now than there are in Pakistan now. Okay? However, they are just 10%, and the Hindu population is 90%, and within that population, there are those that are, friendly to Islam and they are open to everyone. But right now there is a trend that's been going on for several years, which is a very, very right-wing extremist Hindu nationalist group. And these people are in power right now, and they're basically gathering more and more influence, and they're using bell-whistle terms to get even those Hindus who are not with them to be with them so that they could eventually create a bloodbath or ethnic cleansing. May Allah protect them. But yes, that is criticism that was there at that time, and it is until today. But I think the reality might be more attuned to this, which is that they saw that it will not work out good for Muslims. Yes. But you love biryani, so you're okay. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a controversy which was on the language. What is that? I'll just mention one point, which is that when Pakistan was okay, so he said that Bangladeshis and KPK, the Pathan side, they don't like Iqbal because they felt that he was racist. Personally, I have not read anything from any racist. However, with Jinnah, right, when Pakistan was formed, they had a issue at hand, which was that you had a huge group of Muslims that lived on eastern Pakistan, which now later on became Bangladesh, right? Now, the eastern Pakistan side did not speak Urdu, while most of the western Pakistan spoke Urdu, but the Pathan side did not speak Urdu as well, right? They speak Pashto and Farsi. So a question was, what is going to be the national language of Pakistan? Okay? Now, when Jinnah and whoever was in charge with him, when they chose Urdu, that alienated every non-Urdu speaker that was at that time a citizen of Pakistan, right? And now basically that meant that everybody elsewhere, they have to leave their language and they have to learn Urdu, right? Now my perspective is that the languages that were being considered were Urdu and Arabic. And I wish if we could turn back time, that if they had made Arabic the national language of Pakistan, for it being the language of Islam, all of us Urdu speakers, we would have been fluent in the Quran right now. And nobody would have been offended because the Urdu speakers would have to learn Arabic, the Bangla speakers would have to learn Arabic, the Pashto speakers would have to learn Arabic, and Islam is what ties everybody together anyways. So we would have all been Arabic speakers, just like other Arab countries. At one point, they were not Arabic speakings. But then when Arabic was chosen as the language of that country, slowly but surely the whole population became Arabic speaking. It would have been the same for us as well, which would have been so fortunate for us. But, the bygones are bygones. And of course, there were a lot of controversy about that as well. It really alienated a large group of people. Wallahu alam. Okay, inshallah, we will end here. Jazakumullah khair. I hope it was some thought-provoking thoughts. And inshallah, please do read more about Iqbal. You will